Hey, welcome to the fourth and final part of the analysis of the 2004 film Troy. In this episode, I'm going to cover the duel between Achilles and Hector, then go through what occurred in the source material, and move on to a final overall critique of the film. Now, before watching this, it's best you go back and see parts 1 to 3. But hey, if you want to watch the series backwards, here's a quick rundown of what you've missed. Ha! An ancient Greek warrior would never throw his shield like that. Oh, you're just gonna drop it? What is this? Oh my, if I see one more shield being tossed, I swear I'm gonna... Alright, so, after accidentally killing Achilles' younger cousin Patroclus, Hector now faces his arch nemesis, who comes alone in a chariot. That should be easy work. Just shoot him. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you talking? Just shoot him. Easy fight, go next. Hector, come on, man. You're the one that said...
Only children and fools fight for honor.
Or whatever, just shoot him.
No!
Alright. Well, let's see how that turns out. Another funny aspect of this scene is that the entire Trojan royalty just so happened to be chilling at the Trojan gates when Achilles arrived. Imagine Achilles gets there and starts yelling, "Hector!" And everyone was just back in the palace. Anyway, Hector, who was once a realist, is now either a fool or a child, as he decides to approach Achilles to face him in single combat. I don't know if Achilles here looks pissed or indifferent, but I'm gonna go ahead and guess he's pissed. Also, I can understand why Achilles is removing his helmet, at least for the script of this movie, but why is Hector doing so? Not that it matters much since his helmet falls off with the slightest of movements, but I'm just saying. But anyway, enough with the chit chat, let's get to the fight. And let me tell you, man, I love how this duel begins. Achilles approaches, jukes to both sides as he's walking in, aims for the head and misses, then hits him with the shield so he can recover and reset. Perfect. He jogs off to regain some distance, analyze how Hector reacted to his movements, and rushes back in, this time hitting Hector with an aerial strike. Now, let me just preface this by saying that I know many people argue that jumping attacks aren't realistic in battle, but in this case, they are. Aerial strikes were widely used in ancient Hellenic warfare, and the main reason for this is because they needed their strikes to go over the shield of their opponents. This particular strike we see here, however, is done purely as a display of dominance, which is still a valid tactic in a duel of this sort. The only issue here is the point of the spear, which may get bent or penetrate the shield and get stuck. Achilles continues to aim for Hector's head, which is unarmored, but his attack is parried. And one thing I don't like is that they leave the spear lingering for far too long after their strikes. This is a recurring mistake throughout the entire film, where the spear choreography ranges from non-existent to below par. This is something that the filmmakers admit to in the making of documentary.
Most actors and stuntmen want to work with just swords. The stunt arrangers had a kind of challenge there, trying to get the stuntmen and actors to work more with spears.
I wonder if, I don't know, maybe they could have asked someone here in Greece, you know? The over-the-shoulder and behind-the-back strike is pretty cool, but what's up with this hook? It's way too slow, and holding the spear so far from its center of gravity is never a good idea. Going back to what I said earlier, in case you were wondering why letting the spear linger after strike is a bad idea, well, it's because your opponent can grab a hold of it. But a shield strike like this would definitely not break a spear. There's no resistance on the top side, so it would just push it. Also, spears did not break that easily. Take for example Achilles' spear, which of course it's mythology, but it still holds some truth. It was passed on to him by his father Pyles, who in turn received it as a gift for his marriage by Chiron, meaning that this spear was in service for decades. We move on to some shield parries that are theatrical and dramatic, but far too slow for the quickness of a spear. I understand the choreographers here were trying to transition the duel from spears to swords and move on to a weapon they're definitely more comfortable with. But they could have had the two fighters throw the spears, which happened in almost every single duel in the Iliad. Achilles, like in other battle scenes, has his sword strapped to his shield. Again, I'm not sure why they do this. They do show him carrying it properly in other scenes. Hey, check this out. The greaves, a piece of armor, actually working as intended in a Hollywood film. Nothing short of a miracle. Now the swordplay here is just excellent. I mean, really, truly excellent. For real, I love this scene. Look at how Achilles uses his sword like an extension of himself. Like a boxer throwing a gut punch, I mean, it's fantastic. We move on to see Achilles effortlessly dodging some telegraph sword swings, duck underneath another, and boom, a reminder to show Hector who's the dominant fighter. Here we see Hector's sword swings linger for far too long twice, and I can't help but be reminded of some of those various delusive martial arts demonstrations. They have the opponent punch them in slow motion and leave their hand hanging there while they do some crazy techniques. I mean, I suppose it looks cool for the layman, but it's laughably unrealistic. Now, not sure what they were going for here. I mean, sure, he scratches the armor, but is that the best way to show that Hector can hold his own? Next, we get a sequence which can only be described as silly, but it's done to build suspense, so it gets a pass. The block here by Hector actually looks like he reacted to the incoming strike, so big props to Eric Bana. Achilles sees Hector off balance and executes an apolactisma, knocking Hector to the ground. I'm pretty sure Hector here would have fallen either way, since he was off balance to begin with. Not sure why they have a random rock there, because first of all, it diminishes the effect of the kick, and second of all, if he properly wore the shield, it wouldn't have just fallen off his arm like that.
Get up. Won't let a stone take my glory.
Here I'd complain about Hector randomly finding a weapon on the ground, but his ability to do so has already been established in previous scenes. Of course, unlike Ajax, Achilles is unamused. We then get to see some moves that are super unnecessary and awkward, but damn if they aren't entertaining. Wow, would you look at that? Fighters breathing heavy in a movie. Crazy. I absolutely love this rush down sequence here. It's quick, realistic, and it has purpose. Except for that light push that Achilles does at the end. I mean, come on mate, you're holding a sword. That being said, if he would have killed him there, we wouldn't have seen that disarm, some swirly moves, and spear right between the throat and collarbone. Almost the same point of impact in the Iliad. Pretty interesting. And thus, Hector has been slain. Oh, actually, wait, he's not dead yet. I have to see this pretty unnecessary coup de grace first. Makes Hector's armor look weak too, but anyway, okay, now Hector has been slain. I joke, but overall, an amazing fight scene. What I love about this duel is the way they portray Achilles' movement throughout the fight. He charges Hector, he leaps, he has aerial strikes, he has running retreats. I mean, his overall footwork features authentic elements of ancient Hellenic combat, including Pankration. I give it big props for that. As I've mentioned in other videos of this channel, Pankration matches were carried out in large, open-sided arenas called palestre. These allowed for hit and run and charge and retreat tactics. Of course, the fight is not without its demerits. The movie has a recurring theme that has been apparent in every single fight scene, and that's how they've medievalized the culture of ancient Hellenic warfare. Shields being thrown, Ajax wielding a two-handed mace and a headband, duels with no spears, Priam passing forth the sword of Troy instead of a shield or a spear. I mean, you get the point. Still, the duel was different, quick, and exciting. I'd normally give it a 7 or 8 out of 10, but since it's the only fight scene to show at least some semblance of extended ancient Hellenic choreography, I'll give it a 9 out of 10. Now, in terms of the story, I'm afraid that this duel was completely out of place, and it shows a total misunderstanding of the character of Achilles. In this part of the Iliad, Achilles was mournful that he lost his childhood friend, but he was also enraged that Hector would have the nerve to challenge him in such a fashion. Achilles had restrained himself from doing what he does best, waging war. He knew that killing Trojans who had never done harm to him for the sake of the Achaeans was both pointless and immoral, and it was the disrespect shown to him by Agamemnon that made him snap out of this perpetual instinct to fight. Still, his body yearned for combat, and we get hints of this towards the end of his debate with Odysseus and Ajax. He was almost hoping that Hector would attack the ships of the Molossians and give him a reason to fight back. Still, he kept his cool and did not re-enter battle even when other Achaean ships were set ablaze. When Patroclus was slain, Achilles relapsed and turned back into this unstoppable whirlwind of violence and bloodshed that we knew him to be. His rage, his martial skill, and his resolve made him transcend his humanity and reach a level of Hellenic godhood. The reason I use the epithet Hellenic is because I mean it in the sense of the ancient Greek pantheon. The Olympic deities themselves were not perfect and all-loving beings like the god that is portrayed in Christianity or perhaps even Buddhism. These divinities would sometimes appear loving and reasonable, yet other times cruel and ruthless. Attempting to deal with their actions would be like shouting at a storm. You can either curse it or appease it, either way it's going to run its course. And the storm can end up being a blessing during a drought or a burden during a flood. So what I'm saying is Achilles wasn't turning into an enlightened being, he was turning into an unrelenting force of nature. And there are many subtle elements in the story that prove this point. One is how Athena places the Aegis on his shoulder, which is something reserved only for the gods. Or how Achilles no longer desired any form of sustenance and had to secretly be fed nectar of the gods so that his body does not give way in battle. And finally, because of how Achilles spoke to Hector when he slayed him. Implore me not, dog, by my knees or parents, would that in any wise wrath and fury might bid me carve thy flesh and myself eat it raw. In the words of Phagos, this is how the gods hate. His words recall to those of Zeus to Hera. If thou wert to enter within the gates and the high walls, and to devour Priam raw and the sons of Priam and all the Trojans besides, then perchance mightest thou heal thine anger. Just a glimpse of Achilles in this form made Hector literally lose his mind and began running around Troy in a state of panic. Athena had to intervene and convince Hector to take a stand and fight Achilles bravely, but ultimately foolishly. There was no long drawn out theatrical fight. The duel took but a moment. Achilles slayed Hector with a single blow. The duel portrayed in the movie is more like a Hema fight, in that yes, they both wanted to win, but you couldn't feel the burning rage and hatred that Achilles harbored for Hector. Of course, then you might say, if this fight was similar to the source, we wouldn't have gotten this epic duel. For this particular movie, I can understand the argument, since the story is weak and the movie itself was meant to be a simplistic Hollywood action blockbuster. But if it were done in a more serious manner, a duel that ends in an instant would have been much more impactful. You could have also had the long drawn out fights play out when Ajax fought Hector, or when Ajax fought Diomedes, a man who played one of the most important roles in the Iliad and was all but absent in this film. In my opinion, the fight between Achilles and Hector should have been more akin to the final fight scene in Akira Kurosawa's Sanjuro, one of my favorite fight scenes of all time. I won't spoil it for you, of course, the movie is definitely worth watching. Now, if I were to analyze Troy as a whole, it would take me hours upon hours to go through each and every...
17 minutes.
Huh?
We can do it in 17 minutes.
Yeah, we can make the time. We'll edit the crap out of it anyway.
For me, the Iliad is like a religious text, but even if you take it as a text, it's a very well-told story, and you have to respect a well-told story by adapting it in a way that retains the way it is told. This script takes this story and transforms it into something that doesn't work, which shows a remarkable insensitivity to the way the story is told. It shows a remarkable insensitivity to the spirit of the work, a rejection of the spirit of the Iliad. Certain things are taken deathly seriously by the heroes and characters of the Iliad. Kleos, which is like glory, honoring your parents, showing bravery, keeping your word, and Benioff takes every single one of them and clearly rejects them.
Yeah, maybe those of you who are familiar with Benioff, you probably know him from Game of Thrones, and the latter seasons of Game of Thrones have a lot in common with Troy. Big words, catchy phrases, inconsistent characters overall, bad choices, baffling choices actually, but I didn't revisit the Iliad to prepare for this video because I want to be fair to the movie on its own. I'll try my best not to do many comparisons with Iliad, because let me get this out of the way. It sucks as an adaptation in my opinion. It's terrible. It's a shit Iliad. It doesn't have to say anything on the original text, be it on a meta or a straight level, because I would have accepted it. It changes things just because I don't feel there's a purpose or some commentary to be made on the original, on the source material. So getting this out of the way, I do want to say a few things compared to the Iliad, but otherwise I'm going to talk about this movie on its own.
Removing the gods makes character choices unmotivated in many cases, and it makes their actions nonsensical. For example, there is zero chemistry between Paris and Helen. If you were to add Aphrodite in between them, you would not have to rely on us pretending that they're supposed to be in love or whatever, because Aphrodite is making them do this. My favorite scene in the film is the only scene which includes, or at least hints at, some divinity, which is the scene between Achilles and Thetis, in which she foretells his future.
I would have taken it if they left the gods out for a reason, to say something about the Trojan War. But they use the names of the gods all the time in the script. It's not made in an organic way. It feels like name dropping, rather than Benioff's point of view on the religious beliefs and what choices are born from those during the war. Compare this to Game of Thrones. Again, I'm going to return to Game of Thrones because it looks like Benioff is actively trying to kill the fantastical element. I feel that Benioff was forced to keep the fantastical elements in Game of Thrones because George R.R. Martin is alive and Homer, or the collective of writers that known as Homer isn't. So all bets were off. But the point is, if you don't have something to say about the gods or their exclusion or their inclusion, and if you don't embrace the fantastical elements, I have to ask the same thing you did. Why choose Troy? Why choose Iliad to adapt? Why?
The direction of the film is another matter for me because I think that Wolfgang Petersen does a brilliant job in terms of realizing an old school Hollywood epic as much as the script will allow him. The direction is very lush when it needs to be, very visceral when it needs to be, and those two elements are balanced very well throughout the film. And I have to appreciate the direction of this film more because it was made at a time when the historical/mythological epic was on its way out. So Petersen brings a very old school sensibility to his approach, which I really do appreciate. For example, the Sack of Troy is a brilliantly staged sequence, framed essentially as Agamemnon's orgasm, which I really enjoyed. But I think I read that it was cut from the theatrical release of the film, so I don't know.
I really like the art direction. I like the design of Troy. I liked how they used the Maltese sun to...
Except for some reason it's Babylonian.
I don't mind. I would live there. It looks like a vast desert when it's not sea, but I love the place. I really did. But they used the Maltese sun to the photography's advantage. I really like the look of the film. I really like the big scale fights. They were very Braveheart. And the small scale fights, the duels involving Hector, it's been covered the rest of the video, but I enjoyed the hell out of them.
Another thing I enjoyed about the film was James Horner's score, which is just brilliant. It's not as epic as one would expect, because, of course, Benioff wrote a very modern take on the Iliad, and Horner could not have written a very bombastic score to go along with it. But what he did write is very memorable. It's large when it needs to be, it's smaller when it needs to be, and it's probably my favorite thing about the film.
Horner was always very reliable. I think he did a great job here, but don't you find it funny that he always kept that cue throughout his filmography? Because there are four particular sinister notes, ominous notes. They always work, don't get me wrong, but they're always there. It always distracts me. Yeah, that bombastic thing. Or it can be very sinister when it needs to be like Animate the Gates. Anyway, just a little observation. I'm sure others have made it, but yeah, it's one aspect of the film that works because it's not script related.
Brad Pitt is a great Achilles, physically. He got buff, he certainly looks like a demigod, he moves as Achilles should move, very fast, you don't know where he's going to go. But what's written for him is a mess. So unfortunately, I have to say that throughout the film, he ends up looking constipated more than he looks heroic. He looks very uncomfortable throughout the film. And I read somewhere that Pitt really was uncomfortable during the making of the film, so it checks out, because he really does look uncomfortable. He is very inconsistent as a character, because in one scene he appears to be a psychotic murderer or something, and in another scene he appears to be a petulant brat. I understand having some trouble adapting Achilles from the Iliad, because in the poem, he is enraged all the time, so how do you make him relatable? But what Benioff chose to do baffles me, especially the direction that he takes him, where he ends up. Because we're supposed to believe that Achilles was, I don't know, a bad boy or something, who softened because he fell in love with Briseis. That Benioff read the Iliad, and what he got out of it was a redemption arc for Achilles via a star-crossed love with Briseis. I just don't know what to say to that.
I don't think he understood that. I think he tried to Hollywoodize it. And that just... Anyway, Brad Pitt is great casting. Visually, he looks great, but he just didn't fit the role, I thought. Because it's a cast filled with all-season Brits and a German lady, Diane Kruger. He's the only American there, I think. The only major player that's American, and it sticks out, both in terms of accent and in terms of style, acting style even. And it doesn't work. I won't blame that on Pitt. He signed for a role. Maybe he shouldn't. I don't care. I enjoy Pitt as an actor. I don't think he was right for the part here. There's another element that absolves Pitt, and that's the script. His character is so inconsistent. He's my least favorite in the movie because he's so inconsistent. He starts as a ninja assassin for Agamemnon, and he's already on his way to posterity, metaphorical immortality. He knows who he's working for, who he's gonna fight under, Agamemnon. He knows it, but when Agamemnon tries to grab Briseis, he goes against him like it's the first time he's ever talked to Agamemnon. And as soon as he fights a fight on Trojan ground, he becomes a bitter soldier, like he's been spending all his time fighting, which is consistent with Iliad, but the Trojan War lasts 10 years.
Yeah.
The scene I'm talking about...
Iliad takes place within 45 days, but the war takes place within 10 years.
Exactly. Iliad begins in medias res. So the movie shows the Greeks coming ashore. Achilles fights one fight, and now he's a bitter soldier. 2 scenes ago, in Greece, he wanted war because he wanted to be immortal. He becomes bitter, falls in love with Briseis, clashes with Agamemnon, he's ready to retire for some reason, and then Patroclus dies, and he becomes enraged. He wants to kill Hector. He doesn't want to retire anymore. Okay, I can get that little part. He has already mentioned to Hector that he fights for honor, and when Hector tells him before the duel, we need to come to terms, whoever dies has to have a proper burial, Achilles declines. And then Priam begs him, which is consistent with the Iliad, and Achilles changes his mind. He still wants to be a soldier to save Briseis, and then dies. This is all inconsistencies within the script.
That's why no one will remember your name.
I also think that they managed to bungle Achilles' relationship with Patroclus as well. In general, it seems to be very difficult for moderns to understand this relationship, so they either tend to make them gay or to make Patroclus, as here, the protege of Achilles. In fact, Patroclus in the Iliad is older than Achilles. In any case, the biggest problem with what they chose to do here is that for Achilles, Patroclus' death is the worst thing that has ever happened to him. And in this film, he gets over it after a single scene of an outburst. It doesn't seem to be that important to him compared to his newfound love for Briseis, I guess.
And the problem with that is that it affects his relationship with Hector, his sense of honor. And I have to give props to the Briseis romance, because it was built better than the relationship with Patroclus. So when he gets enraged over Patroclus' death, it doesn't work. It's not earned, because they never really stayed there. They didn't do anything with it, other than logically build up towards the death and revenge aspect of it all.
Agamemnon is presented as a snickering villain. He's Snidey Whiplash, he's General Grievous, he's not Agamemnon from the Iliad. He is a pompous ass in the poem as well, but he's not a cartoon. I have to say that I do enjoy watching Brian Cox chew the scenery because that's just fun. But that's not Agamemnon at the same time. I fail to understand who exactly thought it would be a good idea to make Agamemnon into Skeletor.
I control the Aegean.
I can carry out my plan to rule all of Eternia.
Actually, Skeletor has more nuance in most episodes.
If I choose not to compare Agamemnon to his Iliad counterpart, I don't mind. I really enjoyed him. Brian Cox is a treasure. He's amazing. He's fun. He's probably my favorite character and the most consistent throughout the movie. He's a shit Agamemnon if you compare him to the poem.
You sack of wine.
Yeah, but I choose to put that aside. I just wish he didn't die in the end, because I have to go back to the Iliad now, or the source material in general, the Greek shared universe, if you prefer, because it totally undoes the tragedy of the Atreides clan. What the hell? There was a sequel waiting to happen, a spin-off.
Benioff seems to be madly in love with Hector, because in a film that is otherwise populated more by character flaws than by characters, he has made Hector cloyingly perfect. He's just the best at everything. He is perfectly virtuous. He's always right. He is the good guy. Aside from that, I have to say that Bana didn't really work for him. His figure, his face, he looks too rough He doesn't look like a prince. And it's not the good kind of rough like Viggo Mortensen in Lord of the Rings. He looks, I don't know, not like a prince. But the annoying thing is that he's a mouthpiece character in the sense that everything that comes out of his mouth, you know, is the exact same thing that the author believes in. Whatever he says, the author is saying to the audience. And those kinds of characters are always very annoying because they're always right. They know it's going to happen before it's going to happen. And they're just very annoying. So I cheered when he died, which is a tragedy because you shouldn't cheer when Hector dies.
It's supposed to be a tragedy. It's a tragedy because you cheered. I think he works for me as Hector on a level that he looks like a decent guy, an earnest guy who somehow worked up his way into royalty. On that level, he's fine. He's supposed to be the good guy, but here's the problem. It's twofold, I think. We were supposed to be torn between Achilles and Hector, because Achilles is also supposed to be an avatar for honor. We were supposed to have a hard time choosing sides, but Hector makes it easy, because Achilles makes it easy to choose Hector and Troy, but the problem here is, and that's the ultimate failure of the movie for me, Hector is also inconsistent in a very sneaky way. Midpoint, he murders Menelaus to save his brother from certain death, but the problem is, Hector is a mouthpiece for actual honor. He is the decent guy, he is the guy who respects the rules, respects authority, respects his father, respects everything he should respect, but it's inconsistent because he steps on those beliefs by saving Paris. How am I supposed to follow him after that? And there was a great point in Iliad where he actually kills Patroclus on purpose, because he knows it's not Achilles, but he wants to make his men think he killed Achilles to give the Trojans courage and to make the Greeks fear. And they could have used that moment, not to kill Menelaus and to save a character who hasn't earned emotionally the right to be saved, which brings us to Paris.
Yeah, as for Paris, he is one of my all-time most hated characters in film. He is truly, truly a loathsome character.
I love her.
And also I have to say that Orlando Bloom has never looked this weak and wimpy and pathetic. He looks very strong, for example, in The Lord of the Rings. So I guess it's a testament to how good a job he did, because here he looks like he would break if you pushed him. In short, Paris is all that's wrong with this film, because although he is truly despicable and acts in horrible ways, the film seems to think that he's a good kid or something. He steals another man's wife and does not tell his brother until the very convenient moment when it will be too late to turn back, refuses to take responsibility even though from the very first moment that he does this, he knows that it will cause war and he just doesn't care. When he does take responsibility, as soon as the fight turns against him, he crawls away. He literally crawls like a worm away from responsibility and cries on his brother's leg. Then he hides away behind the walls of the city while everyone dies for his stupidity and cowardice, and only pops up when it's time to kill Achilles, just as he's about to be reunited with his girl, and then he just runs away, leaving everyone else dead, leaving the city that he was born in to burn for his own account, and he's just the absolute worst, and somehow the film thinks this is all okay.
And that's the problem. If this was a commentary on Paris and cowardice, this film would have been way better. The problem is, people are supposed to like this guy, not just the viewer. Priam, Hector, Helen is supposed to be in love with this guy. I mean, I don't mind that he stole Helen because Helen went with him. How the hell does the sword of Troy go with him even before the others die? And there's just some sloppy moments, because when we see him after the midpoint, I think, where he practices archery, this is a blatant foreshadowing for the death of Achilles. What the hell?
Whereas before we have been told that he has never been in battle.
He's a wimp. And if the script embraced that he's a wimp, that would have been fine. We're supposed to root for Helen and Paris when other things, cities, people, ideals are at stake. Sorry, but this POV character just doesn't work, and he's supposed to be a foil to others, mainly Trojan characters and Helen maybe. The thing is, he's just a vortex, sucking honor, ideals, and logic of the script. I'm sorry, I don't dislike Bloom. I've liked him in many things, but compare his part here to Will Turner in Pirates of the Caribbean, because Legolas is an archetype. He's one note in a good way. He did a great job there. But he played a human character in love in Pirates of the Caribbean. And he was fine there. Here he just looks awkward. He's supposed to play a guy we like, and he tries to bring as much vulnerability and sensibility to the character. This is for Bloom, not against him. There's not enough on paper there. He's actually working against the script. He's just not right for this.
Helen is butchered because she's just an ornament. She just stands there. It's never explained why she goes with Paris. I don't really believe it. It's never explained why she dislikes Menelaus. I mean, okay, he's...
It's told. It's told, but it's never shown.
Yes, they didn't have any scenes together to explain to me why she doesn't like him, and she just stands there. And in general, the female characters, and the Iliad is full of great female characters, they mostly just stand there and do nothing, and... yeah. And the only performance that captures something of the spirit of the Iliad is, unsurprisingly, Peter O'Toole as Priam, because the spirit of the Iliad is larger than life but human. The characters do have feelings, but they are larger feelings. They are human feelings, but rather superhuman feelings. And Priam is the only character who feels like a real person with real human feelings, but larger, suitable to the epic tone that this film should have.
I think that's because that's a fluke. He's mostly a passive character, both in the Iliad and here. So Benioff didn't touch him too much because all active characters are screwed over. And Priam, he just sits there and spouts wisdom in a good way. That's actually, yeah, true to the Iliad. Peter O'Toole was Peter O'Toole, legend, god among men. But the problem with Priam is the same problem as Hector, because he's forced to be dumbed down and make choices against his character's premise for Paris.
Sean Bean is another bright spot for me in that he makes a good Odysseus, although a very basic Odysseus. The script doesn't give him any opportunities to show how clever and cunning and Odysseus-like he is. But, you know, as a figure, Sean Bean works for me, has a warm smile. Odysseus means more to me as a character than any other character. I grew up reading the Iliad obsessively, and I have to say that as a figure, he just works for me.
He would have been a good Odysseus for a sequel, for Odyssey. He would have been fine. I love Sean Bean. I don't really like Odysseus. He is basic. He feels like an obligation on Benioff's part. He is a plot catalyst in the Iliad more than once. It feels as if Benioff would have to come up with too many workarounds if he chose to leave him out. But I feel that he was inclined to leave him out. Because take the Trojan horse idea, for example. He looks at the soldier and he's like, oh, that's a nice idea to sack Troy. And
yeah, that's what Odysseus is reduced to in the film. Ooh.
Yeah, it's so by the way that I don't even know how to do this. And the way he recruits Achilles in the source material, it's legendary, it's amazing, it's Troll Master 3000. But here it's like, I'm gonna smile at you and you're gonna come with me because I'm just too irresistible. And that's good casting because Sean Bean is irresistible, but on paper, okay, Odysseus is my favorite character in the Greek shared universe. I don't know, I have a soft spot for him as well. And he wasn't done justice because he was a glorified side character. It's the sole existence of Sean Bean that gave him some clout, some presence.
Yeah, well, in summary, let's just say that this film annoys me a great deal. It's on one hand very sad that the historical epic and the mythical epic has gone out of style, but it's films like Troy that make me say that it may be a good thing that Hollywood is not touching those stories because it's touching them inappropriately.
I've only watched the movie twice. Once in theaters, back in 2004, and once a few days ago in preparation for this video. I'm not gonna watch it again. I have no intention. I had no intention before the proposal was made to work on this video. Back then I was very naive and I thought this was on Wolfgang Petersen. I grew up and I realized this is Benioff's fault. David Benioff, who read the Iliad, I don't know what happened. Did he succumb to producers' notes to Hollywoodize the Iliad and make it into something more marketable, quote unquote, because marketable isn't necessarily formulaic or banal like this script is? Or did he just forget what the poem, what Homer was talking about all these years ago?
Guess he kind of forgot.
Well, Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
Hey, that wasn't 17 minutes. Well, I guess you can say you subverted our expectations. And yeah, they really did cover it all. I mean, I expect nothing less from my good friends at Cineposium. If you're Greek or speak Greek, make sure to check out their channel for some excellent film analysis and snacking. Now, before you go, I do have a project that I'd like to announce and share with you, one that I think you'll find interesting. Since my early teenage years, one of my goals, or perhaps one of my dreams, was to make a film that features Pankration in its truest form, since I've always felt that an engaging movie is the best way to showcase the unique elements of Pankration to a larger audience.
Θεωρώ ότι ταινίες ίσως με περιεχόμενο του Παγκρατίου, με τη δομή του και τις ικανότητες οποίες προσδίδει ως αντικείμενο εννοώ στον μαχητή του, προφανώς θα αναδείκνυαν μια πολύ μεγάλη και καλή προοπτική για το άθλημα παγκοσμίως.
But to appeal to this wider crowd, the film must first stand on its own merits and not be another campy or cheesy action flick. With these goals in mind, I've written a script for a short film called Vocation's Echo. It's a script that's literally 5 years in the making and was one of only a few scripts chosen to be showcased at the 2016 Drama International Short Film Festival, despite being in its earliest form. This is also where I met Sifis and Yannis from Cineposium, who will most likely play a significant role in the production and/or shooting of this film. Of course, attaining funding without any big-name connections has been all but impossible, especially in Greece. Still, making a film showcasing Pankration for the very first time could open many doors in the industry, as it can be used as a pilot for a feature-length movie, of which I do have completed scripts. If you'd like to support this goal and see Pankration's unique choreography for the very first time, please check out the GoFundMe page I've set up. Now, the reason I've chosen GoFundMe instead of other crowdfunding platforms is because it doesn't have a time limit. And since the channel is still pretty small, I can use all the time I can get. If you do donate, please keep in mind that it may be quite a while until the goal is reached, if it ever is. You can also support the movie and the channel via my Patreon link below. Once again, I appreciate any support and hope that one day I'll be able to create this film and showcase Pankration in all its glory. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.